All right.
At different places. It's a nice car.
Are we?
Up to that. Guys,
I don't know if we're running or not.
about buying an old wagon.
The red light's on.
All right. Here's what I got. Since Eric couldn't make it, I just threw something together real quick for chopping and lowering chassis. If you want to call it seeing, whatever. A couple examples. I've had these photos for a while. I made them up. One way of chopping the rear or making the rear sit higher and your frame be lower is by doing it this way. And that's what I have here. This is the Revell 2-in-1. I basically just took that chassis, cut it right on this line, and I'm the kind of guy, I hate going out and buying sheets of plastic because it's expensive. So what I use for these pillars were the side pieces that were on the tank, because the tank is going to not fit once I put this body on. The tank's in the way. So there were some frame pieces where this sat. I think it went like this. It sat right here. So basically I cut the frame pieces off the side of that and I used them there. And I left everything rough so you could actually see this is like the beginning of it right here. This frame, and this frame, I use this method for my ride height. It's just two of my sanding sticks thickness. I find if you go too much lower than that, it's pretty much almost on the ground. And, kind of unrealistic if you get too low.
Leave that to Steve.
Yeah, and you want the center to be low, but if you go too low here, then you got to start relocating your engine mounts and all of that because you want the oil pan dragging on the ground. So we raised this up just to the desired height I wanted, and it worked with the way I had that set up. And then when I started putting the body on, I realized that the back axle isn't wide enough. It actually hits the body. So I added, I'll push it up. I did add tubing here and here. You can see where I added it to widen it.
Extended the axle.
Yeah, on the axle itself. I don't know if you can see that over there. You can see where I added tubing right there. That's why I left the whole thing rough, not painted, or I haven't sanded anything. Now I'll go back and I'll add some filler here and I'll sand all this so it looks all nice. And when I decide to lower the front as well, these two pieces here, I brought this, are cut out. I use these little pieces, these tabs here. I cut these tabs out, and you can see I doubled them and I glue them in.
Okay, yeah.
I use a lot of sprue for a lot of different things, and once I sand it and file it and paint it, it'll all look nice and clean. I don't worry about that. I'll bring it over more. But yeah, a lot of these have these. They're a good thickness of plastic. So I just cut those out of there. I'll glue them together, and then I use them for that.
The little number tabs.
Yeah.
Now, what kind of glue do you use?
I just use that, the green super glue you can buy. Not super, but that cyanide stuff. Comes in different pink, green, whatever. That's what I use. And I use a little zip kicker with it, so it'll cure instantly. Yeah. I had this all apart. I have this taped, this middle piece that's just taped here. And I'll roll this up to it, and I'm like, all right, that's where that needs to be. And, put my glue here, and I'll hit it with my zip kicker, and it dries. These were actually standing up about this high. I actually did cut these off just so it looked a little bit better at the moment. But this pretty much all matched up real nice, and same thing, I just roll this piece up, glue, I zip it real quick, and, that's how I mocked that up. And then I just look at it and I'm like, yeah, it's pretty much where I want it to be. I'm pretty much eyeball everything.
Now, when you make
sometimes I'll measure, but a lot of times I just eyeball. I'm like, that's the look I'm going for. I'm happy with it.
when you get it all finished, mocked up, what are you going to do for your interior?
I have no idea at the moment.
You're going to kick the floor up in about the same way you did?
No, because the body's going to be channeled down over the frame. I'm not really going to have to do much with the interior. That's a nice thing about Zing it this way, like and you have here. You're just lowering the center, so if the body stays where the part you're lowering is, you don't really have to adjust anything on the inside. Whereas now, like this one, when I built this, I channeled the body down over the rails, but I didn't actually move the frame down. So I did have to cut these inner panels out to make everything work better. But this one, everything should still fit just the way it's supposed to in the kit.
Oh, I see.
It pretty much should, yeah. The only other thing I do with these sometimes is where this fits in, this little tab that goes in, I think I already have, do I have this glued in? Yeah, I did glue that in. I'll sand around that tab, and I'll take some material off, so this thing actually, the axle actually sits up higher in there. I really don't care if I take a little bit too much off to make it look, you know, not real, because you really can't see underneath, so I don't worry about that. So that helps lowering the front as well as just doing the Z's. And like I said, I'll sand this, I'll clean it all up, so eventually it'll look better. Like, let's see if I get one. I don't think I have anything here that's already been cleaned up. This is a different example. I basically tried to bring 3 examples with me of how to do this. That one can just stay. The next one, this I did this exact same way as this, but I didn't leave it taped down. This is from the Revell 31 Model A kit. It's been redone several times. It has one where the doors open, everything. It's a real finicky kit to put together, all this chrome. I did this one the exact same way. I put it down on top of my sticks. I taped it down so the frame was taped down, and then I just decided to cut where I felt like cutting, to be honest with you. You know, when the body's going to sit on it, I'm like, well, that needs to be there. So if I cut this here, as long as that all stays where it needs to be. And there were actually lines, you can't see them now, but there were actually lines right here on the frame that, I don't know what they were from, mold lines, but they were just perfect. So I just cut on that mold line and sliced it off. And then these, again, are those tabs, just bigger ones from the sprue. I just glued those on, let them dry with my zip kicker. And then I assembled all of this and glued it into the frame, so I could just roll. I can roll the whole thing up, just roll it up and glue it. And then this is, you know, it's I call it a tape jig versus like a jig where you can actually lock everything down. And then to lower the front, that's more like that's more like one of these. It came out kind of blurry, but that's more like that style. I'm not sure what.
That's the wishbone.
Yeah, like I did on this one here. This piece right here, I brought my directions with me. When you're building this kit, there's a piece you put in the back for the rear bumper.
Yeah.
That piece there is actually this piece cut off. I'm like, you know what? That's going to work. I like the look. That's going to work real good. I don't have to, you know, make a whole bunch of L pieces. So that's really all that is. And then sanded down a little bit of the leaf spring on it, glued that all on, and I drilled these holes. Because then, you know, the real ones, they actually have the U-bolts that come through and bolted together. So I literally drilled some holes and I took some wire to make my own U-bolts to go in it just for a look.
Now that you've got it all glued up, how are you going to paint it?
I'm going to strip all the chrome off and paint the whole thing one color.
Okay.
It's not a big deal. It's going to end up being a rat rod anyway, so I really don't care. You know, not a big deal. I didn't have time to strip everything because I just started doing this yesterday. I just didn't have time. I normally would have probably stripped everything and then assembled it, but that's the deal with that. And these are the wheels that went in it. It sits up kind of high, so I might go with some different wheels, you know, as a rat rod goes. But once I put the front tires on it, it sits up a little higher than I had planned on. This will look cool. It's not as low as that, but it's actually a lot lower than if I hadn't done that. It would be sitting up even a lot higher.
You know what would look good on that? Those wheels that are in that 37.
Yeah, a lot of things
Ford
look good.
With those, what do they call those? Artillery wheels?
Yeah, I probably have an hour in doing this and maybe an hour and a half in doing this one, just because to put all the chrome, this is a lot of pieces. If you guys ever assembled this kit, this front end has like, I don't know, 15 pieces to put together. And just scrape all the chrome off, make everything glue on. I mean, that's 1, that's 2, that's 3, that's 4, 5, 6. I think there's just 6 here, but there's more pieces that go on yet. You know, it's the opposable steering and all of that. And this is like 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces. So that's just a simplified way of doing it. I mean, you can take your time and make it a little bit more like that. But when I look at my magazines, I see a lot of the frames and the rat rods, and it's like they just cut them, weld them, and you're going. So it's really not that hard to do. I like taping it because it holds this. So once I get my suspension on, you can just roll it up, and it's pretty much where you want it to be. That's that. This one from the 57, lowering the front was a piece of cake. This one I just drilled. I just drilled new holes. mean, that's pretty much standard because all old holes are way down there. Just drill new hole. And another thing I did do on this one is where the bottom A-frame goes in, it has that. It's supposed to be, it should be a spring, but it's basically just a big hunk of plastic. I actually shaved that down. I don't know. I just started sanding it. I can't tell you how much I took off. Maybe a 32nd of an inch or so. That just helped lower that whole assembly even more. Plus your holes. And then the back has a ton. This is more like the classic hot rod style, where you actually add something to the leaf spring. If you look at it, you can see I actually added a whole bunch of material, cut the leaf spring off, and added probably 6 or 8 inches in reality of material.
Yeah, lowering blocks.
Yeah, lowering blocks. And then I actually bent these up. These are literally bent up, so it'll sit even lower. And then where it fits down here, I sanded. Did I sand that down? No, those are just bent up. And once I did all of it, that was a lot of work. Maybe a couple hours, test fitting. And I finally had it to where, I was happy with it. I probably had to redo it 2-3 times to get it to as low as I wanted it. But I did that one the same way, where I had my sticks taped the chassis down to the sticks, so I had my height, and then just kept playing with all of this until I had it to where that chassis is sitting like this. I don't have the photo with me of this, but I had a photo I was going off, and the darn thing is almost on the ground. A real one. So.
Praise the Lord.
Yeah, and then these are just examples of that I've already done. You can look at it and see. That was a lot of work because there's a lot of individual pieces for that one. And then on the Volksrad, I was holding. You can see it's similar, but I actually made L pieces to go into it. That's pretty much how they do a Volksrad in real life. I don't think I have a photo of. Yeah, I do. Here, that's a really good photo right there of how they do a Volksrad. If you want to look at that one. Same thing with that one. That's more of the rat rod style. Guys, you can move it around if it breaks. It's not a big deal. But you can be real intricate with it. If you're trying to do a real nice hot rod. If you're just doing a rat rod, you don't have to be real perfect with it. This one I lowered a lot by cutting. I'll use this as an example. I literally, off of this one, I cut the leaf spring off of it, and I mounted this part of the leaf spring right down here, which I've seen people do in real life. So you're actually lowering the whole leaf spring 3, 4, 5 inches, and then I sanded the living crap out of the leaf spring so it's really super thin. So when I glued it up in there, you can't even really see it. So that really helped lower that front end a lot. And this one in the back, how did I lower this? It sits, the frame is goofy on this model. I don't know if you can see it, but there's actually pieces in the frame that the axle is supposed to sit on, which doesn't make sense in real life.
Little round pot thing?
Yeah, well I have a round file. It's similar to this. I just kept going into that thing until I probably took off half of the material that was there. So I made that sit a whole lot lower. And now I also Z'd the back of the frame on this one too. You can see down inside there. It's Z, just like either one of those. You can see the Z. The one that comes in the kit has a kind of a mild Z to it. It's more of a round. I probably lowered that thing a scale 8 inches at least, just to make it look good. So that's really about it. That was going to be quick and easy. I was going to leave it open for questions if anybody has any other questions about it. I used, like I said, I used the green. It doesn't take as long to set. It's a little thicker, but I do use Hobby Town's accelerator. That way it sets up real quick. That way if I'm like, that didn't work out, I can get it apart. But I want it to set up so I can actually take it off here and look at it and say, yeah, I'm happy with that. That's good.
How long is it when you use a super glue type adhesive? And then you put what you call zapping. How long does it normally take to sit?
It's instant. That's why I use the accelerator. It's instant.
Okay. So you got to be really careful.
Yeah, but with this kind of glue, it doesn't attack the plastic, so you're not actually welding the plastic together. So it breaks apart pretty freaking easy.
You have to.
The one thing I've noticed using the accelerator is the glue gets more brittle than if you don't. Like this one here. Yeah, I use accelerator on all of that. I don't think when I built some of these I'd use any of the accelerator. I just glued these and let them sit for maybe 10 minutes. It has a stronger bond than these. 'Cause I've dropped stuff like this and it'll just snap. And it's just a glue joint snapping. Whereas other ones I've done where I've actually glued them and not use the accelerator, they seem to have a stronger joint. The accelerator is great, but I think it gives you a weaker joint. And I wanted to use it because I wanted to get this built quickly. I didn't want to wait. I didn't have a lot of time. I had a lot of stuff going on. But when I started building this frame, I spent a lot of time. This one's actually just glued with regular cryonide glue, and I think that's that. I use the super glues pretty much on all my models. I don't use really anything else anymore. That I use E6000 for all my clear stuff, just because it's really super sticky and almost dry. It doesn't dry completely, but in about 5 or 10 minutes, the windshield's not going to fall out or the lenses aren't going to fall out. And I just use a little toothpick
And
to
it
get it
doesn't
on.
fog.
Never fogs, no. That's what I use for building when I put anything on my guns, all my little things I add to them, it's E6000, and stuff ain't coming off. And I buy it at Walmart, it's $3.97 for a big tube. It's cheap. Yeah, or they got smaller tubes too. That stuff's great, it really is. I've actually used it sometimes for mocking up wheels instead of using the sticky tack. I've used a little bit of E6000 because it doesn't dry hard, it dries kind of rubbery. So you can actually get some things apart, like chrome. If I want to attach chrome pieces without scraping off the chrome, I'll use a little bit of E6000 just to see what it looks like. And I can pull it back apart and I can scrape that E6000 off.
I use Gorilla Glue too. It works similar to E6.
I've used that stuff at work, but I've never used it, on building models. So the only thing I would say about lowering, anybody who's ever lowered one or hasn't lowered one, just decide how low you want the chassis to be to the ground. Find something to put underneath it, like popsicle sticks. I save my old sanding sticks. Like I said, I just tape them down. I tape the chassis to it, and then I start cutting it from there, and then just fitting everything together. You want to use a ruler to measure everything, and calipers and all of that. Great, go for it. I don't care. A lot of guys say, "Oh, I'm doing a scale 6 inches." Good, do it. I eyeball everything. I just make sure it looks square. And I get it together.
And then it's practically it's
And
drivable.
I just use a brand new X-Acto blade to cut this. All this plastic cuts really easy.
You don't use a razor saw.
No, I did use a razor saw when I lowered this because I wanted to actually just lower it the thickness of my razor saw. That's all I was going for, which is
About an inch or two.
yeah. And I was real happy with the chop on that. I thought it was gonna be a lot more difficult, but it actually worked good. But and I think the hardest thing probably I've ever done is just trying to get this squared up, when I put the new blocks underneath it, and then to keep the ride height. And I really like this ride height because it's super low.
Yeah.
And what's really cool is I've put the engine in several times. I still got clearance for the engine.
You still
Well, actually, I should lie. I actually shaved the oil pan a little bit.
did you allow for the drive shaft clearance
Plenty
on
clearance.
the chassis?
Plenty. Did I bring? Yeah. I'll show you what I did. This is cool. This is very cool. I have several round files, either from work or at home. I literally,
Reamed it.
this is so thick, I was able to take a ton of material out, so when I put this in here, the drive shaft will fit, it clears it. You can see where I took some material out.
Yeah.
You can see. And just a little bit right here in the middle, and there's still plenty of thickness on the chassis. Didn't really have to do anything else. And I still got that thing sitting so low in there. The drive shaft still it literally just fits in there. I really don't care.
Don't hit too many bumps
Who cares?
in a real car.
It's a hot rod. Who cares, right?
This isn't your daily driver.
Yeah.
No, I mean, how many hot rods do you see at car shows? You're like, yeah, they're not driving that.
It's a shelf plate.
Back in the day, a lot of the hot rods.
They're
you saw,
called
they
them
weren't
trailer
driven around.
queens.
So I mean,
You can tell that how drivable a hot rod is how it is brought to the show.
Well,
if it's trailered, it ain't driving.
I use a lot of one thing I haven't tried yet, and this is another one where they've taken 2 leaf springs and you see they're welded onto the outside of a frame, and then that's a whole different kind of setup. I'm like, well, that's interesting.
That would allow you to go low.
You can
go low.
They used to call that underslung.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's an underslung.
So that's one thing I haven't done yet. But pretty much all this stuff is really easy. This is hard because it's real intricate and
What do you
it's
use
real
for this?
precise. That's not me.
Oh, that's somebody else.
That's just plastic. I'm sure they cut it and they drilled it and then they filed it.
Then
And
they use just like,
I have no idea what they use. I just use pieces of wire on mine for
they
that
use like
one.
little bolts
Yeah.
that you can buy for
But,
watches and
You know,
stuff.
if you're making a rat rod, you really don't really care if it's perfect or not. So, you can be precise, because I see stuff in here that is like, super precise looking. I say, mark some of these
It's
pages.
easier to work with a real car than with
Actually,
a
I think-
miniature version of it.
No, I think the plastic's easier to work with, because you're not doing all this welding and all that kind of stuff.
Doesn't have to operate.
Yeah, I mean, there's no way I'd probably try and drive some of the stuff that I make. I don't know if there's a good example in here of these. No, there just isn't.
There's only so many things you can do with it.
Yeah, but I mean, of course, this is one of my favorite magazines to still pick up, Hot Rod Deluxe, because I just love all that old stuff. But once you get to this point, I didn't do any of this. Here you're going to have to put on some trailing arms here for stability and some shocks and a few other things. But I'm not worried about that at the moment, because you got to have something to keep that thing from shimmying all over. Same thing with the back. You have to do something with that yet. But that's for a whole nother. This is just basically, here's how you can do a frame, and then you can figure out the rest after that. So, any other questions? Anything else? Because Steve, you do a lot of lowering. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah,
Probably do a little similar.
It's a different setup, but I do a lot of work on 49 Mercuries.
Yeah.
And what I'll end up doing is cutting a notch, vertical notch here, and
Yep.
then cutting out underneath it
Okay.
where the springs go.
Okay, yeah.
And
yeah.
I find that, that gives me a low appearance. On the 49 Merc, you can do it both in the front and then in the back.
Okay.
And it'll lower it.
Yep.
It'll lower it quite a bit.
I have done that. I don't remember which one, but yeah. You're after putting a notch in the frame, so the
Yeah.
leads for yeah. I think that I do. I don't think I did. No, I haven't really adjusted any of that frame at all. So yeah, I started this right after our last meeting, and this is really as far as I've gotten. So that's it.
Hey.
That's it. So
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
no,
you very
thanks.
much.
Thanks for the interest. I'm not just